the Student Services Director in the South Beloit School District. I've worked with her for the past 4 or 5 years. We often think of the Student Services Director as the one who's making the decisions about the programming and the money. She does that for sure and a great job at it, but she also is so hands-on and knows these students individually. I've seen her. She knows if they got a haircut. She knows if they need, their goal is to get their driver's license, but maybe they don't speak English at home, and how can we get resources to help them. So when I was thinking about this training and bringing a guest, like I didn't have to go, I wonder who I could get. She was the first person I thought of in Black excellence as special education. This is Imari Hanserd. She's gonna come and she's gonna share her story, and I'm gonna ask her some questions, and you will get the chance to ask her questions at the end too. So if you wanna welcome her. Thank you so much for coming. Okay, so do you wanna just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. First, thank you for that beautiful introduction. That was really wonderful. My name is Imari Hanserd. Like Alice said, I'm the Director of Student Services at South Beloit School District. I did not start there with that position. I actually came in as a school social worker and then was kind of made to have that job, but things work out for a good reason. I am a proud Rockfordian, and I'm a product of public school. I went to Jefferson High School and public schools for my whole career, so that was really nice. I have my undergrad degree from Augustana College. I have a master's degree in social work from Aurora University and a master's degree in educational leadership. I love working in the school setting. There's some challenges every day. Sometimes I say, what am I doing? But then when you have a really tough day coming back home and reading an email from a very tough family or a difficult situation, it's reassuring that you're in the right place.
So did you specifically start out wanting to work with disabled students, or what led you to that population?
I always say that the population came to me. I've never had like a regular job, I like to call it. Like I never worked at a grocery store or a fast food place or like a clothing place like I've always wanted to. When I was a teenager, my mom basically told me, hey, you need to go to Rockford Park District Job Fair. I was like, well, I don't want a job. Like I have to have a job. And I was just kind of following my mom's guidance and didn't want to disappoint her. And I had no idea what jobs were even available. I just walked into one, and it happened to be an interview for a summer program for students with disabilities called Room for Play. I was 16 years old, and I feel like ever since then, my career has always led me in that direction, in that path. I've worked in mental health. I've worked in foster care for a short year. That was pretty tough, but I've always come back to working with students with disabilities, and I love it.
Can you share with us any experiences that you've had, maybe personally, or that you've observed of racism and or ableism in that education setting?
Unfortunately, I hate to say that it happens often. You know, listening to this slide in the presentation, it's things that I'm already aware of. So it's difficult to listen to it and hear it, and it's even more difficult when situations are occurring and you see it. It doesn't happen every day, but I would even say my own experience when I was in high school. I really wanted to go to Augustana College, and my guidance counselor told me, you're never going to be able to get into that school. You need to find somewhere else to go. He should not have done that. You know, you go home. I didn't tell my mom. I probably should have. She was the PTO president at the time. But it was like, oh, I can't believe he just said that to me. But in the setting that I work in now, it's unfortunate that I always say, you know, they call them my students. They're not my students. They're all of our students. So it's very difficult sometimes to remind people that you need to also think of other students that don't just look like your norm. I'll give an example of field trips. Field trips is something that students look forward to going to school. Parents want to know about the field trips, but it's unfortunate how often I have to say, hey, did you consider our student that is in a wheelchair? Did you consider our students who have seizures? So it does happen, unfortunately.
How do you handle, or how do you work to bring that healing or understanding when you observe either towards yourself or towards others, microaggressions on the job?
Microaggressions, well, first I would like to say knowledge is power. So I think it's really important for people to understand what a microaggression even means. Oftentimes, when you are a person of color, you can recognize that much sooner than other people. As far as how to bring healing is feeling comfortable with having those difficult conversations. Do I want to have those conversations all the time? Not at all. They're hard. Sometimes I'm angry myself, but I don't want to present that way. I also don't want to be the only person who always has to talk about, like, hey, why did this black or brown kid get a 10-day suspension for doing the same thing that a Caucasian child just did yesterday? Or to have the conversation about equity and fairness with our students with disabilities. But I feel like I stay where I am to take that task because it needs to happen. And everyone needs to see that difficult conversations are hard. They may last quite some time, so we may have to revisit the conversation, but building a community where you can feel support in having those conversations, I think, is most important.
What's the biggest barrier or struggle that you see that your students or students of color have that other students don't, that you observe even in your school, or you don't have to get right down to your school, but in public school in general?
Well, first I would like to say South Beloit is a very unique school district. It has a high poverty rate. It's nestled in between Wisconsin, Beloit, which is more of an inner city population, and then Hananiga, which is a more affluent population. So it's very interesting to learn the lack of understanding that staff has for any of the issues, in a sense. So I would say barriers are just lack of understanding, and then also taking the next step. So yes, I don't understand why the student is doing this, or yes, I don't understand what that language barrier is, but then what I can do to take the next step. Yes, I don't understand, but I can go ask a question. And then tell the student themselves, like, hey, I don't understand what you're going through. Can you share that with me? And then don't just have the one conversation. So I think the barrier would be number one, the lack of understanding in general.
What are the mental health impacts that you, and I didn't realize you also had a background in mental health. What are the impacts that you see specifically on the Black students and the disabled students as well? Or when you've got those two identities combined, what are the effects that you observe?
I think first, the biggest thing is people have to realize that two things can be true at the same time. I think sometimes we just want to say this is an issue about race, this is an issue about ableism, but also mental health is nestled in there too. So sometimes I always say there's levels to this, there's different pieces to a story, but I would like to say for our students, we see very high amounts of anxiety. Obviously, ADHD presents itself differently in different students, so sometimes that may look like aggression, and people will say, oh, they're just so angry, or they're just, they're a fighter, or they're aggressive, but deep down there's more depression rooted in there. There's a lot of PTSD and trauma that these students are dealing with in a day in and day out. I mean, it doesn't just happen just in school. When they go home, they're dealing with a lot. So I would say the impacts are often they're getting in trouble, so they're being sent home quite often. and explaining the importance of what the school can do and how the school can continue to build a community, and what we should do to help support our students with mental health. It is a very difficult thing to do because a lot of our teachers didn't go to school to be mental health providers. So it's a lot of education that we have to present for them as well to be able to handle and manage our students with mental health issues. Oftentimes they just want to bring it and push it to the social workers, which I mean makes sense. But if you only have 4 social workers in a district of 1,000, they can't be there for everybody.
What is your greatest hope or wish that you've got for your students?
Because South Beloit is so small, it is a community, but I would like this, specifically the population that I work in, to feel a sense of belonging in their community. A lot of times, I always say the community has a lot of generational issues. We see a lot of the same issues that are coming each year, each generation of families. So I would like them to feel a sense of belonging and support, that no matter, you may have graduated years ago, but we're still here to offer that support for you. And if they don't feel like they belong, they're not gonna come to us for that support.
I definitely want to open it up because I bet our staff is like big into participation. I know they got a lot of things to say and questions to ask, but is there anything else in light of our discussion or stuff that we presented that you want to add or share before we open it up?
Well, I think this is a wonderful presentation. I would have loved to come to the ones that you've had prior, and maybe if I could sneak out of work, I would like to come to the others. But I think this is such a heavy and hard topic and conversation to address. But I do think it's something that needs to continue to happen. I always tell some of my staff members, like, hey, how are we identifying our students with disabilities? And sometimes it sucks to be the person to say, like, look at these stats, like, why do we have this amount of brown students that qualified for this specific disability, and like, what can we do differently? So I would definitely say there are a lot of things and a lot of people who are wanting to make a difference. And you see a lot of positive change, and it's wonderful to be a part of that change, but I think that it's important to continue the conversation, keep it going, and continue the work, because we're all dependent upon one another, believe it or not.
Thank you. And I want to open it up.
I actually have something. My name's Megan.
Hi.
And we serve, I was thinking about our youth education and advocacy program, and we're in 4 counties, Boone, Stevenson, DeKalb, and Winnebago. And one of the things, I know the presentation talked about like over and under identification of students who are a person of color and have a disability. And one of the things I was thinking about is like in real life, I know this is real life too, but what we see in a practical sense is like we'll go to an IEP meeting, or we'll even just requesting evals for a student who we know has a diagnosis, like mom, dad went out, got, like, we know the kid has ADHD, autism, something. And, or we suspect a learning disability, and we'll write the letter and we'll request the evals, and they'll just say, no, we're not gonna evaluate because, like, his peers' grades are the same, or we expect the same, like, this is just what we expect them to perform at. Or once in a while we'll get an IEP meeting, and they'll blame so much on the home life. Like, this behavior is because of the home life, or this is because dad is absent, or what have you. Like, literally they'll say this stuff aloud. My question is, like, if you saw that in your school, how would you advocate against that?
So I would say that it happens in our school every day. I'm someone who receives the IEP request, obviously, and unfortunately, there's a lot of systems in place that makes the schools function that way. So obviously we will see that there's a student who's having some issues, but if you look at them upon their same age peers, they're not any different. So sometimes the school, I can speak for my district, because we're such a small school district, you get dinged with funding if you have a large amount of students with IEPs, or a large amount of students receiving certain services. So it's not that we don't acknowledge that they have an issue, it's just, is their issue impacting their learning significantly enough that they need this specific support? So unfortunately, it happens every day. I always like to talk to the parents. ISB has a beautiful parent guide that it's 200 pages. It's kind of ridiculous, I like to say, because most parents don't have time to read that, but I like to equip them with that information. So like, yeah, I may be looking at you saying like, hey, we unfortunately we need to say no because we have to go through all of the data collection through NTSS and tiered and levels, and you have to wait a certain amount of time to track the data or consistently show that they're not having academic growth. So it's a difficult thing that happens in education, but I think the system makes it very difficult to explain that to families as well as to explain that to teachers inside of the school setting, because once they get that IEP, then what, right? So a lot of times we have because we're such a small school district, we have class sizes of, I think highest maybe 21 students, and that's the high, it's usually like 17. Just because they have an IEP, they're not going to be out of your classroom. So sometimes it's equipping our staff with what else can you do to help support the student, and if the student does have an IEP, what does that look like? But there's a lot of systems to that, so it does happen, and unfortunately, especially the schools who have a lack of funding, and if you get deemed from the state, you're not gonna get the funding. So it's a very difficult situation to be in. So I don't know if I answered that question, but I see it every day, so.
Awesome, thank you.
Yes.
So just on the flip side, I do understand about how if you have an abundant amount of students who are receiving services under LD and they happen to be Black, and then the state comes down on you. But in some situations, I do firmly believe that students who need special education services are denied them because schools are worried about that number, which then has a very negative impact on that student for not getting the services that they truly need. So as a Center for Independent Living, what are your thoughts on how we could go about addressing that issue with the state? I get why they did it, right? So I get that part. I have a daughter that has Down syndrome. I totally understand class sizes and all of that. However, when you are so tight on some things that you prevent students from truly receiving that free, appropriate public education, there's an issue. So how do you go about, or thoughts on what would we even say to the state? How would we get that fixed, or how do you start even addressing that issue?
I would first start with obviously your school board and then your local legislators. So make them aware of the issue, but sometimes, and if I say you start with the school board comes to meetings once a month. They may read some of the information, but they need the details. So providing that letter, providing that data to support it. So sometimes feelings get very much involved in things because, we feel very strongly.
Right.
So sometimes it's hard to get those feelings out of that letter, so make sure you're providing the data to support it. Hey, these 5 students needed an IEP 5 years ago, and because the IEP was denied, they're now, out of the 5 students, 3 have been expelled. What are we doing about that, and how did we miss them, or how did the school fail them, and what we can do to address it?
Right.
So I would say for sure start with the local officials. I would say the school board has a lot of power. Oftentimes they don't know what's happening. Oftentimes they're dealing with a lot of what you say, the bigger issues are the Auburn situation, they're dealing with the legality pieces, but
Right.
there's a lot of pieces that you may have just that 1 or 2 school board members who they're like, wow, that's really interesting, can you come and talk to me? So
Yeah.
I would say start with school board and local officials.
Okay, because I do believe, what I've always told parents and school district staff, no child that I know of ever started off not wanting to come to school.
Yeah.
Not ever. It was the place to be. It's what you want to do. And when that starts to change, we have to look at what's happening.
You're 100% right. And we have to look at ourselves. And
Yeah,
sometimes that's
everybody.
very hard to address. And I always like to tell our students and our parents, like, we're not perfect. Let us know when we're doing something wrong. I may not be able to fix it right away. I'm going to try to tell you as best as I can without losing my job that, you're not wrong.
Yeah,
I agree.
it's just really sad.
I wanted to echo what Imari said about the data as well. In my own experience with my son, he has 3 overlapping disabilities, and I knew he desperately needed an IEP. And I loved his school, and I loved the people there, but we kept butting heads on this issue of the IEP because academically he was fine. And I finally asked them to please evaluate the data, like you said, and it turned out academically he was fine, but he was completing only 20% of the work in the classroom. And when that was discovered, not only did he have an IEP, he was put in a self-contained room. Like, it was, all of a sudden they're like, oh, whoa, okay. And when I went to his IEP meeting last year, like, I got emotional because he completed 95% of the work. He needed that. So it's very hard as a parent, you all the YAs know, to take your emotions out of it, but like you have to and bring that. Are you gonna ask a question?
I have a question, and I'm not sure if it's gonna have much of an answer, but I think this is a room of people who are going to be sympathetic to everything that's said here. And I think that sometimes when we try to convince people that aren't sympathetic, we tend to speak more to ourselves than to them, if that makes sense. And I'm curious what strategies you have found effective, if any, in persuading people who say might be in favor of the book bans or rejecting these facts. What has gotten through to them as far as showing them?
So I'm shaking my head because you're 100% right. And one thing I try to do, even though it's very difficult, the things that I believe in, I surround myself with people that are similar to me. Sometimes I try not to because I just want to hear what they have to say because I'm not in their shoes. I wasn't brought up like them. I wasn't raised like them. And when I say them, it's all people who may be thinking differently than me. But I always like to start with like, hey, this is kindness. I try to give them the kindness that as best as I can, even though it may be difficult for me sometimes, and try to hear them out. And that's probably the best advice I can say is opening up the door to have those difficult conversations even when we don't want to, and asking them why, and then saying, like, hey, this really upset me. We can agree to disagree. Can we come back and talk about it? Because I may need to go get some of my research because, again, my feelings are really upset, and I may not have been able to articulate everything I wanted to articulate. So coming back to have that conversation, it's very difficult. I mean, I find my own self personally, I try hard not to unfollow people on my own social media because I don't want to be that person who, just because they don't believe in something or understand something, to just block them out of my life. So it's important to continue to have those difficult conversations and removing myself before they see that the frustration and maybe possibly anger comes out, because then they're not going to ever want to talk to me. So I don't know if that answered your question, but it's a very difficult thing. It's something that I deal with all the time at work as well. So I don't want to always be that person to bring up those conversations that it's difficult to get people to hear.
Thank you.
This is Deanna. How do you come up against, and again, to echo Dana, I don't know if you'll have an answer, throw it out there. The suspensions is a big one that I know our YAs are facing often, especially within RPS, because they throw down that code of conduct, and that is law, and that's concrete, and there's no wiggle room. But when you know, as the advocate, as the parent, as the student themselves, themselves and are trying to express that these behavior issues are related to disability. When you have letters from neurologists and medical professionals and psychologists saying like, yes, this all aligns, but the school is like, code of conduct. Like, how do you bump into that? Because it's just, I mean, they don't let you chisel away at it.
So again, I probably don't have the best answer for this. I will say right now in our district, we are handling a zero tolerance policy that's been in handbooks for years regarding suspensions for students. And so again, I'll say bring that to your school board, because oftentimes like they're just used to things being the way that they have been, and sometimes those kids who have the aggression or the behavior or the outburst are viewed as disruptive students. That, you know, that's 1 out of the 10 disruptive students. If I can get them out, that's, you know, they think it's gonna make things better, even though I say the moment you get 1 out, you're gonna get 2 more. So we have to address the issue, but I would always resort back to trying to bring that up to the school board and keep bringing it up until they realize, hey, we have to address this, because oftentimes with the data, they have to see that this is a problem, it's gonna continue to be a problem, and sometimes it's important to let them know, like, hey, you don't have a lawsuit yet, but you're gonna be very close to that if you don't pay attention to what's going on. So you don't wanna threaten them, but you do wanna show them, like, hey, I want you to pay attention to A and B and let me know what you think. But suspensions is a huge problem. I mean, I bring it up to our principals. I feel like I have a good relationship with them right now, so sometimes they'll say, hey, Imari, like, this is what's going on with the student. This is really bad. This is what I'm thinking, but what do you think? So hopefully they can foster, the principals or the people who are putting the discipline in play, dean, principals, that they can foster a relationship with maybe the social workers, the special ed teachers, the case managers. So it can be almost like a team decision even in the midst of that discipline.
Questions, comments? If not, thank you so much.
Thank you.
She came out of school day. And yeah, we want to encourage you to look at the art exhibit. Otherwise, you have 32 extra minutes in your day that you didn't think you were. Thank you.